I work with high performers. These are women that are making a solid impact in the world. They're highly credentialed, they've had success, and not one of them called themselves an expert.
Welcome to Future Fit Leadership, a podcast for emerging, experienced and executive leaders to build community, grow capability and future focus their career pathways. There has been a global shift in how we lead, and our conversations with leaders and executives explores the skills, strategies and mindsets that is needed to thrive in this ever-evolving landscape of the future. So whether you are a seasoned executive, an aspiring leader, or simply curious about the future of leadership, we are here to give you practical insights to unlock your potential, change the status quo, and break open our assumptions on how work works. Produced in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives, Future Fit Leadership is your place for bite-sized learning for executives hungry to make a change. Hello and welcome to Future Fit Leadership. I'm your host, Sadhna Smiles, and I hope wherever you are listening to this podcast, you are well. Here we are back at International Women's Day, a day that I'll be honest, I don't celebrate anymore. And I know I am not alone in that feeling. Why? Because for too long, it's felt like a talk fest. Every year we gather for breakfast, lunches and panel discussions. We listen to inspiring stories, we applaud, and then we go back to business as usual. No real change, no real accountability. And here's the proof. At our current rate, gender parity is still 130 years away. Let that sink in. 130 years. We are not moving fast enough, and in some areas we are even going backwards. This year's International Women's Day theme is Accelerate Action, and that means moving beyond conversations and into bold, visible change. So here's my challenge to every leader that is listening. What action are you committing to today? Will you stand up at your event and commit to it? And next year, will you come back and show us what you actually did? One of the biggest barriers still holding women back is our reluctance to own our own expertise. Penny Locaso's latest research proves it. Women hesitate to call themselves experts. Many of us feel like we have to tick every box before we put ourselves forward. And if we don't see women in positions of power, we subconsciously believe we don't belong there either. And as leaders, we need to break these patterns, not just for ourselves, but for every woman coming after us. We keep talking about women's advancement, but where are the men? Gender equality isn't a woman's issue. It's a leadership issue. If the only people in the room are women, we are preaching to the choir. We need men at the table, not just to listen, but to take action within their own spheres of influence. And if they aren't part of the conversation, how can we expect them to be part of the solution? And diversity matters on stage just as much as it does in leadership. Look at the speaker lineup for this International Women's Day event that you may be attending. Does it reflect the real diversity of women in the workplace? Are we seeing women of colour, women of different abilities, LGBTIQ plus women, women of different sizes and backgrounds? If the only women we put forward as leaders fit one narrow image, we send the message, consciously or unconsciously, that leadership is only for a select few. So today, in this IWD 2025 special, I sit down with Penny Locaso, a powerhouse who has uncovered the data behind why women struggle to claim their expertise and, more importantly, what we can do about it. We discuss the ick factor, why women resist calling themselves experts, the invisible checklist, how much is enough before we step up, why, if we can't see it, we can't be it, is still a major barrier, and practical actions that leaders can take now to help women rise. This conversation is not just for women. It is for every leader, every ally, and every organisation that wants to drive real change. It's time to stop celebrating IWD like a checkbox event. Let's use it as a moment of accountability and a chance to reflect on what we've actually done to accelerate action. Please enjoy my conversation with Penny Locaso. Hello, Penny. Welcome back to Future Fit Leadership. How are you today?
It's lovely to be back. I'm great. I'm actually really good.
I have to tell
And
you
I'm
that,
honest.
well, you're the first guest we've had come back for the second time. So we're very pleased to have you back.
It's an honor. It happens a lot. It's a nice thing though, right?
It is a
When
nice thing.
yeah,
It
if
is
you've
a
got
nice
different
thing.
things to talk about.
Exactly right. And we do because while we've had a break from having a conversation with you, you've actually done some research and published a white paper called Hidden Figures, Where Are All the Female Experts?
I have.
I've had a good read of it and I love it. Before we get into that, though, I want to ask what inspired you to do the research?
Yeah, two things. So I'm doing my honors in psychology, and one of the subjects that came up was advanced statistics. And I don't know about you, but every time I say that to a woman, she cringes.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm not good at statistics. This is going to be terrible. This is a nightmare. I did the subject, I worked my butt off and found that I was actually really good, and I got a HD. And it made me realize that even though it's extremely challenging, when you understand data and how research is done, it can be extremely powerful when used in the right way. So I was like, how can I use what I've learned? Because I'm all about applied learning. Otherwise, the learning is just knowledge, it's not skill. And then that was partnered with, I work a lot with executive women as a coach and female entrepreneurs. And what I was seeing in my work was I work with high performers. These are women that are making a solid impact in the world. They're highly credentialed, they've had success, and not one of them called themselves an expert.
Mm.
And when I partnered the two things together, I was like, you know what? I'm really curious because I believe the language you use determines your ability to have an impact and to make change. And I had a suspicion, my theory was that women actually had a negative relationship with the word expert. And if that theory was proven true, then I was like, well, this is actually a barrier to women truly realizing their potential and being able to get into positions of power and influence in the way that we would like them to create gender equality. So that was kind of the catalyst.
Because when you think about, and I hate calling myself an expert, and I cringe at the word myself, and I don't see myself as one. And
Mm.
so when you think about, the implications of that, is that, you look at the imposter syndrome, and women do hold themselves back, and we wait till we've ticked all the boxes before we put ourselves forward. Is this part of some of the trends and patterns that you're seeing come out?
Yeah, so there were four key themes that fell out of the research. Do you want me to go through?
Well, yeah, let's go through them because actually, before we do, where can people find the research?
Yeah.
Because is it available online?
It is. So if you go to hackinghappy.co and you'll find it on the homepage, there's a link at the top of the page that says, here's the white paper. It is a white paper that is written for women, but equally advocates of women. So there are a series of recommendations at the end of it because I'm all about turning the research into action that makes a difference. So there are a load of recommendations to actually help people take their learning and turn it into something meaningful at the
And
end.
that's a really good point because I don't want people to think this conversation is only for women. This conversation is actually for leaders to understand why women in their businesses perhaps are not putting themselves forward, not seeing themselves as experts, and what you can do to help them change that paradigm for them, which will come to the end. But I want to start with the four key things. The first one, which I love, is the ick of expert and how the word expert presents a barrier to being one. If you're not going to call yourself an expert, what would you call yourself then?
And so here's the argument. The reality is you have to you have to call yourself an expert in order to compete.
Mm.
Okay, because so one of the recommendations is to actually get curious about your relationship with the word expert. So why is it that it makes you feel the way that it does? Because I'll guarantee you it's from some experience or some perception that you have, like it will go back. So get curious about why you feel the way you do with the word expert and consider how you could reframe your relationship with the word expert. And the reason I advocate for that, and I equally had the same inner resistance, but now everywhere I am, I call myself an expert, because if women like you and me don't do it, no other women are going to do it, right? Because we are experts. You certainly are an expert. And the thing is that what I've realized from the research and from, I've spent a lot of time studying the existing literature around what makes an expert and how you get positions or opportunities in positions of power and influence as an expert. Owning your expertise and talking about the fact that you are an expert is the pathway to the impact you seek. And what the research found was that most women, they're not driven by the word expert, but they are driven by the word impact. And so what I talk a lot about when I do my keynote or my masterclass around this concept of the expert effect, which is what I call it, I actually talk to women about the fact that you want to have an impact, you want to make a meaningful difference in the world. Most women want to leave a legacy. They want to be role models for their children or for the next generation or for other women. The only way that you can do that is by owning your expertise. It is the pathway to the outcome that you want. Look at your
That's just
face.
reframed the whole thing for me.
Yes. That makes me really happy.
Because the question you asked me is, why do you feel ick about it? And I think
Yeah.
the reason why I feel ick about it, and I don't know what other women feel, is because when somebody calls me an expert, my expectation is I have to know everything.
Mm.
And I don't. And so that worries me when people pigeonhole me as, oh, Sadhana's the expert in X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, I actually don't know everything about X, Y, and Z. So why are you calling me the expert? But on the flip side, I think a lot of men would be happy to be called expert, even if they only know 50% of the knowledge of what they're being called an expert about.
So without a doubt. So you've already identified the gap. So the reality is that a man who is half as qualified as a woman will call himself an expert, and the woman won't, because she hasn't ticked every box, which leads into, it's a beautiful segue for the second theme that came out of the research, which is how much is enough. Now, you've just touched on this. This was fascinating. So women believe they have to tick every box before they can call themselves an expert. But when I asked the 21 women that I interviewed for my qual research, what are the boxes you need to tick? They couldn't tell me. And so what I did was something creative, and I'm quite proud of this because I thought it was a great idea. I said to them, okay, let's look at the women that you look up to who you consider impact experts, women making a meaningful difference in the world that are experts in their field. Immediately they could think of someone. I'm like, what are the qualities in these women? What is it about them that makes them an expert? And they listed all these things, one of which was they don't profess to know everything. They're completely vulnerable and open and transparent about that fact, but they will learn and grow and experiment and share that journey, right? And yet, so one of the quality that they admired in the experts that they look up to was completely incongruent of the expectation that they had of themselves. So what they love about the experts they look up to is the fact that they don't know everything, yet they won't call themselves an expert because they don't know everything.
Everything. It doesn't make any sense, does it, when you put it in that way?
But
So
it came out every time. And I was like, this is fascinating. We hold ourselves as individuals to a different standard to what we hold the people we look up to. Awareness is the first step to any change. And that's why I love this research. So just creating awareness around these things, like you said, starts to make you think, okay, well, how could I look at this differently?
And also, I like the term impact expert, because you're not talking about having knowledge about everything, but you actually talking about the impact that you may have on a particular issue or matter. I want to go back to this second one and this whole imposter syndrome, which causes us huge hesitation to put ourselves forward. And I think, I don't know one woman who hasn't suffered from this. Do you think that changing our language will make a difference? And what, you've done a lot of research around this. What's your best advice for women to get their mindset shifted on this space?
So the science tells us, and I hate the term fake it till you make it, right? And
I know, yeah.
I hate it. But the science tells us by doing that thing, like the best way to overcome a fear, is by actually stepping into the fear. It's exposure therapy. It is one of the most effective therapies in psychology. And so calling yourself an expert. So when I stand on a stage now, and I never did this before I did this research, right? And I've been doing what I do for 10 years. I stand on the stage now and I call myself an expert at the beginning of every talk, and I validate why I do that in order to inspire other women to do the same. It is the practice of doing this every single day that will start to create those new neural pathways to make you know that it is okay, that it's not a bad thing, it's not an icky thing, it's actually a thing that opens the opportunities that we seek as women to make that impact.
So if you're a leader in an organization and you can see a woman who is hesitating to put themselves forward, what's your advice to that leader in terms of having a conversation with her to say, these are the reasons why, or we would love you to put yourself forward for these reasons. How is the best approach to that conversation?
So the first thing I would do before I had the conversation would be I would find a public space like a team meeting and actually acknowledge the fact that that woman is an expert in some field.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the reason I would, say her name or say it's you. I would sit in the team meeting and say, you know what, Sadhana's the expert in this area. Let's refer to her opinion for this. Now, the reason I would start there is what the research found was that whilst women won't call themselves an expert first, if someone else that they respect and admire validates them as an expert publicly, they then feel okay to use that term. So I keep saying one of the most powerful things leaders can do, especially in the lead up to International Women's Day, which is next weekend, is get on social media and name the women that you think are experts in their field that are having a significant impact. What is it about them that makes them so damn good? And call them an expert. It is, or get in your team meetings and do it. It is the most powerful thing you can do. And then I would have the conversation and say, you know why I did this? I did this because there's research that shows, that women have an issue with the word expert. And yet we know that owning your expertise opens the pathway to the career that you're looking for, the opportunities you want, the impact you want to have. So how do we create the space for you to step into more of these opportunities to show people your expertise and to practice them?
Mm. And the third piece, which is we've sort of talked about, is that they're afraid because it was exactly the reason what I said to you is because the expectation is I need to know everything.
So this was fascinating to me, right? Because again, we're talking about the women I interviewed were high performers in entrepreneurship and executive roles. Right? One of them was one of my psychology doctors. She's got a PhD, right?
Yeah, so super smart women.
And she still wouldn't call herself an expert. And what came out from these women was that there is such a strong fear of being judged, of being criticized, of being called out as an imposter, particularly if you're in the media or on a stage. Like someone actually said, I'm afraid that I'll be called out, as someone who is a bullshitter. And then how do I come back from that? And I was like, this is crazy. And again, it links directly to what we said. It's about this expectation that we have to know it all. And that we can't make mistakes. And if we make a mistake, that then diminishes our credibility and we can't ever come back from that.
Yeah, and I actually do think that second piece you've just mentioned is so important because again, I'll use my experience. I have felt that way, that if I make a mistake, I'm going to be judged much harsher than other people around me. And I work in a very male-dominated environment, I'm quite often the only female around the table, but in the back of my mind has always been that fear. If I make a mistake, I'm going to be judged a lot harsher than everybody else.
So I had the same fear, right? And I'm an international speaker. I've spoken in front of thousands of people all around the world for pretty much, every major industry. And I used to have the same fear. And the way that I overcome it, which, oh my God, I get goosebumps now when I say it, but it's gold because it makes me feel so comfortable on stage now. Because everything I share is evidence-backed. When I start a talk, I will often say to people, I'm here as the expert. But the reality is I don't know everything. So if there's something in my presentation that you don't agree with, that you've seen different research around, or that you have a different perspective on, I'd love to open the floor and have a conversation around that. Because I'm here to learn just as much as you. And people love that because it puts you, on the same level. I'm not higher because I'm on a stage. I'm still just the same as you. I'm just sharing what I know in the service of us growing together.
The other thing is quite often it's our own language in our head that makes us feel that way, right? Because the chances are the people around that table see you as the expert and are not going to judge you more harshly. But because you've had previous experiences around that, you apply that lens to every other situation you find yourself in. 90% of the time, probably you find that people don't think that way about you.
We are the stories we tell ourselves, and
Mm,
those stories originate often from our childhood. So last year, I spent a year studying trauma with Dr. Gabor Mate, and people were like, "Why did you go and study trauma? You're doing psychology." And I'm like, the reason I went and studied trauma was because what I see in high-performing women, and pretty much anyone I work with, is that all of us have some trauma. And
mm,
when I say trauma, there's big T trauma, which is, the really huge stuff. And then most of us have these little T traumas, like my parents getting divorced when I was 11. What happens with trauma is it's not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you as a result of that experience. So it creates an imprint on your autonomic nervous system. And that imprint basically means that whenever you're in a position where you feel threatened again, like you did in that experience as a child, even if it's completely unrelated, but it generates that same feeling, that imprint within will override your rational brain, and it will bring little Sadhana back into the room, and she will behave like the child she was when she felt that experience last time, if
mm,
she hasn't done any work to process it. And that's
interesting.
where trauma is fascinating, because that is how the stories that we use to navigate the everyday,
Mm.
that is how they show up. And those stories originate from being a child. And
Or,
it's
or
funny because
workplace trauma that you might have had in a previous job or
absolutely.
something like that just shows up, and you've just got to be aware of it so it doesn't impact the amazing work you're doing in your current business.
Correct, because all it is your body trying to keep you safe. So that autonomic nervous system is designed to keep you safe. So it's why you go into fight, flight, freeze, or
Mm.
fawn. A lot of women go into fawn and they haven't heard of this term. It's the newer one. And fawning is basically going into overdrive of people pleasing. It's like, how do we get things back to a point where we don't feel so uncomfortable?
That's so funny because I think we do it in relationships as well.
Without a doubt.
And not just in business, but you do it because you just don't want to be in that icky space. You want to feel a level of comfort. So you will do everything you can to bring it back to that, even if it needs calling out.
Absolutely. So fawning is highly prevalent in women. And as you say,
Yeah.
getting back to that point of comfort, the whole purpose of the autonomic nervous system is to bring you back to that place of homeostasis where you feel grounded, at one with the world, connected and calm. And so that over people pleasing is your body's default mechanism for many women to get you back in those situations where you're triggered to feeling safe. But what happens is that some of these behaviors that we've have evolved due to the trauma can often be maladaptive, because we know not having constructive, uncomfortable, conversations can actually be problematic in itself, because the issue, the root cause, never gets addressed,
Mm.
which
How do
makes.
if you're aware of that behavior, how do you change it?
Well, you've got to start with awareness, right? You
Yeah.
have to start with awareness. And then realistically, I would say you want a good therapist.
Mm.
There is I am a massive fan, even though I study psychology, which is all about the head. The reason I went and studied with Gabor Mate is there is a lot of amazing evidence-backed work, which is around somatic healing.
Mm.
So we as humans spend far too much time in our brains, in our heads, not in our bodies. We are disconnected from our bodies. And so actually getting a somatic healer, when I say healer, therapist, that actually connects you back into your body is one of the most powerful ways to process this stuff and actually get better at noticing those triggers and having smart strategies that bring you back to that place of homeostasis quicker. Because you can't
Mm.
take away the trigger unless you remove yourself fully from environments. But you can get better at bringing yourself back.
Yeah. Let's move on to the fourth one, which was if I can't see it, I can't be it. I find this really interesting, and I'm going to use a personal analogy around this because I started in my role as a CEO in my industry way back in 2010, 2011, right? But at that time, there were no other female CEOs in my industry. I was the first, but I was also the first female woman of color CEO as well. Now, it wasn't So I couldn't see it and I couldn't be it probably didn't really apply to me. And I look back on it now and I go, well, how did I do it? And it was because I just had so much grit and determination and I knew that I wanted to do it. And so I did everything within my power to actually achieve it. And I had good businesses and male sponsors who enable that to happen as well. You know, if that particular brand hadn't employed me, yes, I had all the right, ticked all the boxes in terms of the interview and my skill sets, etc. But the brand still had to take a risk on employing a woman. So, and I had a lot of good male sponsors who opened the door for me. How does this issue, if I can't see it, I can't be it, actually impact women's confidence?
So what we found, and I mean, your story is probably a little bit similar to mine, right? Not that I'm a woman of color and not that I've been a CEO, but some of us are just born, yeah, with that grit and determination naturally. Okay. And that's what I say, we all have a different baseline. And so there are women like you and I who will just persist even if we can't see it. However, what the research finds and what we know from other evidence is that that's not most women.
Mm.
And so this idea of if I can't see it, I can't be it, what was interesting that fell out of it was the fact that women were talking about the fact that they couldn't see other women like them on stages. And what they meant by that, it was not just color of skin, it was shape, it was size. So it was really around physicality. It was women that looked different in how they dressed, how they showed up. And I was like, this is fascinating because as someone who speaks all around the world, for example, most of the women on stages are like me, they're white, middle-aged, educated. We're like that. We are the modern day white man,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
so true. It is so true.
it is. And, I see that privilege. I know that privilege. And so even women there was a woman who was in the research who was, quite large. And she said, I don't see fat women on stage. That was her words, not mine.
Mm.
And she said, I want to see fat women on stage because then it makes it okay for me to feel comfortable to be on stage. So again, when you say, how do we build women's confidence? If they can't see it, they can't be it. I'll never forget someone said to me once, if you cannot do it for yourself, do it for every woman coming after you. If we don't step onto these stages, if we don't take these opportunities in the media to be experts, yeah, if we don't step up, nothing will ever change.
Nothing will change.
So do you want to be part of talking about this problem? Because again,
Yeah.
that's what I see a lot of. There's a lot of talk. We're not short on talk. Or do you want to be part of actually being that one woman on the stage that looks different, that inspires one other woman who was in the audience to do the same thing?
Mm. And it takes organisers. I mean, if we're talking about conferences and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
coming up to International Women's Day, and it's a perfect example of, you get a lot of organizations organizing lunches and breakfasts and, events, etc. But to have a look at your lineup and ask the question, how diverse is this lineup really? And does it reflect what I see in my business?
Absolutely. How diverse is it? Does it? And so here's what I wrote as well in the research as a recommendation. Does it actually only support women who have already arrived? Or are we
Mm.
actually supporting emerging leaders? Like, are we actually giving the next generation of women the opportunity to step up as experts? So I actually think, how many conferences do you go to where there's an emerging experts series? There isn't. So
Mm.
you've either made it or you haven't. But how do you get to making it if no one will put you in an opportunity to do that?
Mm.
So, and the other thing is with, as you say, with these events, I've just written an article which Women's Agenda are going to publish next week. I actually think International Women's Day is broken.
Oh, I
And
was just going to ask you that question. That was my next question to you because we are talking about it. Is what are your thoughts on I don't celebrate it anymore? I actually just can't do it. And I wrote an article, it was last year, I think, or the year before, maybe last year, and Women's Agenda published it as well, where it's like, I actually cannot celebrate this anymore because we come in here year after year. We have the same conversations and
yep,
then we go back to doing the same shit that we did
yep.
before that breakfast, that lunch, or that event. What is the point when we're not moving forward in any rapid rate at all, in anything?
So my argument is, as someone who benefits greatly from International Women's Day, I've got 4 speaking gigs with global giants in the next 2 weeks, right? And so, but I fundamentally am going, I'm happy to talk about the fact that it is broken because I want it to change, because I think it's important. And so for me, I'm sick of the talk fest.
Mm,
And so I'm like, how do we actually shift it from a talk fest and inspiration, and everyone walks out all inspired because we've heard all these great stories. And yeah, it's important to celebrate women and, you know, the contribution that they make in every sphere of life, but we fall short on actually being accountable for taking action. And so my challenge this year is to every single person doing anything for International Women's Day, you should have built into your event a commitment to take action. How will you hold each person in that room accountable to making a single commitment? It doesn't matter how tiny it is. So I talk a lot about putting the I back in equality. If we
mm,
don't individually be accountable, this collective we that shows up every year walks away and goes back to their normal life and nothing changes. And so I'm all about how do we activate the individual accountability and get everyone to make micro changes, because the compounding effect of the collective will start to make some bloody difference.
mm.
Because we're currently at 130 years before gender
Yeah.
parity, and that's actually gone
Yeah, it
backwards.
has gone backwards. I think to add to that, I'd love your commentary on this, or, thoughts on this as well, is I'm doing a couple of speaking gigs for International Women's Day, and majority of the people in the room, if not all the women, people in the room are women. And I keep saying this is until we bring men into the fold, and if we have to change the name, then change the bloody name. But until we bring men into the fold, then it really isn't going to change. And secondly, I like the fact that you're saying, make a commitment. But if you were an organization that was actually, having a breakfast, is to stand up there as a leader and make the commitment around what you see your organization doing to move, forward parity, or more diversity in your leadership team, or more diversity in your CEO group, or whatever that looks like, is to come back the following year and report on it, to say we made this commitment to you a year ago and here we are actually saying we did it.
And that's exactly, I completely agree. And one of the things I've created, which, you know, it sounds a bit trite, but it's a hashtag IWD 2025 commitment. And so if you're a leader standing on a stage, I want you to tell people what you, not the organizer, what you are
You.
committing to doing for the next year to make a difference in this space. Yeah. And because it's the leadership that will then, you know, activate everybody else. And
Mm,
so, in me sharing my commitment, I'm now inviting you to get yours down, post it on LinkedIn, talk to people about why you're doing this, put the hashtag in. And like you say, let's come back next year and let's talk about the commitments we made and the traction that we had around those and the challenges we faced, rather
mm,
than coming back and just having another chat about how broken everything is.
mm. Agree. Let's hope that happens in some of the events.
I hope so.
What are some of the recommendations? Because I know you've got a bunch of recommendations in your research, but what are some of the recommendations? Let's first talk about women. So, your recommendations to women around these 4 research items that you've discovered.
The first recommendation is to get women to get curious about their relationship with the word expert.
Mm,
Why does it make you feel the way it does? Yeah. Like I journal on this sort of stuff. So just sit down and ask yourself, why, if I feel ick about it, why does it make me feel that way? Where does that story come from? Was there an experience, a moment that informed that, or is there just a general belief? Okay. And the other thing I would challenge you to do is have a conversation with a peer, like
mm,
another woman, about her relationship with the word expert. Because again, just being aware of this is perhaps the most powerful start point. The second thing that I advocate is actually women becoming comfortable with this concept off the back of the research that owning your expertise is the only way that you can realize your impact at its truest potential. It's the only way you can get the opportunities, the big opportunities that you long for, that perhaps you're struggling to get.
mm,
Okay. And so the way that I advocate that women do this is it's a practice in resilience. And the practice is called micro bravery. It's getting out there every day and doing one small thing that makes you feel a bit ick, makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. It might be calling yourself an expert, but it's linked back to you owning your expertise. And we know that this practice of micro bravery builds our resilience, and it makes us realize that owning our expertise is actually quite powerful. It can actually have an impact. So they're kind of the two. I'm all about the micro changes. They are the two start points. If you're someone who wants to advocate for women, like I said, that the most powerful thing you can do that is so simple and takes 5 minutes is to call another woman out as an expert and do it publicly.
In a meeting, in your boardroom, in whatever that looks like, in whatever form that looks like, is just to do it publicly.
Absolutely. And look, there's a load of other recommendations in the white paper, but I'm like, pick one, start small and build from there, because it is the micro changes that we make in the day before us that have the impact long term, because the compounding effect of that over time is what makes the difference. When we try and change everything, we change nothing.
Penny, it's been wonderful to talk to you again.
It's been great to have the conversation.
I love the research, and again, we'll put some links on the show notes in terms of where people can download it. Enjoy your speaking gigs for International Women's Day.
I will, and watch out if you're in one of them, because you will be held accountable to making a commitment.
Making a commitment, exactly. Watch out if you've booked Penny this year. You'll be asked to make a commitment. Penny, thank you so much, and I'm sure we will have you back on this podcast again at some point in the future.
Thanks, it's been great.
If you like what you've heard, please share, rate and review this podcast, and don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. The producer of Future Fit Leadership is Maritza Barone from Guide Your Light Network. If you would like to reach out to me, please DM me on any of my social media platforms. I'm available for speaking at conferences or consulting to your business. Future Fit is created in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives. If you'd like to join the community and receive a free takeaway each week, sign up at the Future Exchange app in my show notes. Thank you for having me in your space.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.